Imagine the ground beneath you is 142 degrees. Not the air, the ground. The actual surface of the earth under your feet. Your shoes are beginning to soften. You can feel the heat pushing up through the soles, through your socks, into the skin of your feet. The sky above you isn't blue anymore. It's white, bleached out, like the sun has burned the color right out of it. And the man you have loved for 19 years is lying face down in the dirt in front of you. He is not moving. You say his name, once, twice, 10 times. The desert swallows every sound the moment it leaves your mouth. The heat absorbs it, the silence closes back over it, and the only answer you get is the wind, which does not care about you at all. She had no water, no phone signal, no road in sight. She had been moving since before sunrise, and she hadn't even started yet. Miriam Castillo-Vega survived 90 miles of the Sonoran Desert alone in summer without a map, without training, even without anyone coming to find her. She did it in 9 days. She was 47 years old, 5 feet 2 inches, and had never spent a single night outdoors in her life. She was a dental hygienist from Tucson, Arizona. She packed her lunch every day. She drove a 10-year-old Hyundai Elantra. She had never thought of herself as someone capable of extraordinary things. The desert forced her to find out otherwise. This is how she did it. And there is one detail about the moment she almost gave up, and didn't, that will stay with you long after this ends. You need to understand who Miriam Castillo-Vega was before any of this happened. Because that understanding is the whole point. She grew up in Tucson, the daughter of Mexican immigrants who had built a quiet, decent life from nothing. She had inherited their values completely. Work hard, show up, love your family, don't make a fuss. She had been a dental hygienist for 16 years at the same practice. She knew her patients by name. She remembered their children's birthdays. She was the person people called when something went wrong. Not because she had answers, but because she always showed up. Her husband, Roberto, was 51, a logistics coordinator. Practical to the point of stubbornness. The kind of man who wore the same brand of boots for 23 years because he'd found ones that worked and saw no reason to change. And he kept a paper road atlas in the glove compartment of every car he'd ever owned because he didn't trust GPS in remote areas. Maps don't lose signal, he used to say. Miriam had teased him about it for 19 years. That atlas would later mean everything. They were not adventurers. They were not thrill seekers. They were two ordinary people in the middle of an ordinary life, driving home from a family wedding in Hermosillo, Mexico, a cousin Miriam hadn't seen in 11 years, and the reception had gone long and joyful, the way good weddings do. They'd decided to take a shortcut home through the desert, a route Roberto had read about on a trucking forum. Paved for the first 40 miles, he said. Locals use it all the time. What neither of them knew, the route had been officially closed by the Mexican government 4 months earlier. 2 bridges had been destroyed by flash flooding. The detour signs had blown down in a windstorm and no one had replaced them. One phone call to the Federal Road Authority, which lists closures publicly, would have ended this story before it started. But they didn't know to make that call. Nobody told them. And so on the morning of July 14th, with the air already smelling like hot metal and dry grass, with Roberto humming along to an old song on the radio, with Miriam feeling completely and perfectly content, they drove into the desert. That was the last normal moment of her life, and the pavement didn't fade out gradually. It didn't taper into gravel or give any warning. It simply stopped, and 40 feet ahead, where a bridge should have been, There was a concrete channel and a 5-meter drop into a dry wash. Roberto hit the brakes. They got out. They looked at each other. They decided to turn around. That should have been the whole story. A bad afternoon, something to laugh about later. But the road they'd driven in on, 40 miles of packed clay, had been flooding while they'd been moving forward. Monsoon runoff from 50 miles north had been sheeting silently across the surface behind them, invisible in the flat desert light, spreading in a thin brown film. When Roberto tried to reverse, the rear wheels dropped 3 inches immediately into what looked like solid ground, but was, underneath, the consistency of wet cement. The car didn't spin out. It simply stopped. It held. Roberto got out to dig with his hands. The mud closed back around the tire before he could clear it. The sun was directly overhead now. The temperature inside the car, even with the AC running, was already 48 degrees Celsius. The engine had been running hard in the heat for hours. The radiator, which had been leaking for 3 weeks, which Roberto had been meaning to fix before the trip and hadn't, gave out with a low, metallic knock. Then silence. In 45 minutes, the inside of that car became uninhabitable. They had 3 liters of water between them, Roberto's Atlas, half a packet of crackers, Miriam's phone at 34% with no signal, 1 emergency Mylar blanket in its original packaging, the clothes on their backs. Roberto, trying to be useful, stood up too quickly in the heat. He sat back down immediately, said he felt dizzy, said it in the voice men use when they're trying to sound fine. Miriam handed him water. She thought it was heat dizziness. She thought it would pass. Roberto Castillo had an undiagnosed congenital aortic narrowing that 16 years of annual physicals had never caught. The heat, the exertion, the accumulated stress of the afternoon. Together they triggered an acute cardiovascular event. He lost consciousness within minutes. She performed CPR for 40 minutes. She counted every compression out loud, the way they'd taught in a first aid course she'd taken years ago and never imagined using. She kept going when her arms stopped working. She kept going past that. He was gone before the sun started to descend. She stayed beside him until dark. She did not leave him the way you would leave a stranger. She left him the way you leave someone when you have run completely out of choices. She covered him with the Mylar blanket. She picked up the Atlas. She circled their location in pencil, carefully, precisely, in case she needed to communicate it to someone later. She had thought ahead, even in grief. Even in those first hours of loss, some part of her mind was already solving the next problem. Then she started walking east. She walked at night. This was not a decision she made from training or prior knowledge. She made it because she had spent the previous 7 hours watching what the sun did to everything it touched. She had watched the clay bake into plates. She had watched a lizard sprint for shade and not come back out. So she had felt the air pressing against her skin like something alive and hostile. She was not going to walk in that. During the day, she slept under creosote bushes, using the Mylar blanket as a reflective ground layer beneath her to deflect the radiant heat rising from the soil. She didn't know that was the correct survival technique. She discovered it by lying on bare ground for 3 minutes and understanding immediately that it would kill her. That kind of thinking, fast, physical, and instinctive, correct, would define everything that followed. She gave herself one rule for water: 4 small sips per hour, no exceptions. She held each sip in her mouth for 10 seconds before swallowing, trying to absorb every molecule of moisture. She had 2 liters when she started walking, By the second night, her urine had turned the color of rust. She had seen dehydration in the dentist's waiting room, construction workers in July, brought in by co-workers who'd found them confused and stumbling. She recognized the sign. She was past the warning stage. She kept walking. On the third night, she found a dry creek bed. This is where she did something that survival experts would later call textbook, without having read a single page of any survival textbook. A dry creek bed in the Sonoran summer is not dry all the way down. At the lowest point of the channel, where the last water pools before a stream bed goes fully dry, the moisture remains in the sediment long after the surface looks dead. Miriam used a flat rock to dig into the curve of the channel. She dug 18 inches before the soil went dark. 6 more before water began seeping into the hole. Silt-clouded warm, tasting like wet clay. She drank it through her shirt, folded 4 times as a filter. It kept her alive. She was navigating with the atlas and a trick Roberto had mentioned once at dinner. From a hiking book he'd read and never used, but it talked about the way people talk about things they find interesting but will never do. To find rough north without a compass, point your watch's hour hand at the sun, bisect the angle between that and the 12. That's south. She had rolled her eyes when he'd told her. She remembered that. She thought about his voice explaining it, impatient and a little proud of knowing something useful. She used it every night to keep her bearing east. She used his voice to keep her company in the dark. On day 4, she found a prickly pear cactus. She knew what it was from the grocery store, not from the wilderness. She had no knife. She scraped the spines off the pads with a piece of flat slate and ate the flesh raw. It was 80% water by content. No, she didn't know that. She just knew it felt like survival. She ate until there was nothing left and kept walking. Day 5, 40 miles covered, arms burned to blistering, left ankle already swollen from a bad step on a rock the night before. No voice above a whisper from dehydration and constant open-air breathing. She heard an engine. Stop here for a moment. Think about what she's working with. 2 liters of water left. Day 5 of 9, 1 bad ankle, no shade. 3 options in front of her. She could run toward the sound, wave the mylar blanket, signal as loudly and visibly as possible. Maximum chance of being seen. Maximum risk of burning through reserves she cannot replace if the vehicle doesn't stop. She could find a high point first, get elevation, assess direction, signal from a position where she'd be visible against the skyline. More strategic. But the engine might be gone by the time she got there. Or she could stay still. Conserve. Hope the vehicle passed close enough to spot her on its own. What would you have done? Take a second, really think about it. She ran. She grabbed the mylar blanket and ran toward the sound, crashing through desert brush, not caring about thorns, running on legs that had walked 40 miles in 4 nights. She made it to a rise just as a rancher's truck crested a low hill. He saw the silver flash of the blanket. He stopped. He got out of the truck. He looked at her. Then he got back in and drove away. He had seen her. He had assessed the situation. And on the horizon behind her, an afternoon thunderstorm was building. He was late getting his cattle in. He made a judgment call. He would report it when he reached the ranch. And he drove away. She stood there and watched the dust settle. She had burned more energy running than she had in the previous 12 hours. Her ankle was now swollen to the point where her shoe was cutting off circulation. She had maybe 48 hours of walking left in her body. She sat down in the dirt. Then she made herself stand up again. She did not sit back down until the sun rose. Day 7, 31 hours without sleep. 60 miles covered on foot. Her left shoe was off. The ankle had swollen so badly she'd cut the laces with sharp slate on day 6 and was now walking with the shoe loosely wrapped around her foot using a strip torn from her shirt. She was putting maybe 40% weight on that leg, and then she stopped sweating. She didn't know the clinical name for what was happening, but she felt it. A sudden, yet strange calm, like the desert had decided to stop fighting her and just let her be there. Like everything was fine, like she could rest, like resting would be okay. Severe dehydration mimics acceptance. She had walked directly into the final stage of heat stroke without recognizing it. Her thinking was slowing. She was aware of the gap, the way each thought seemed to be arriving from a great distance, the way time was softening at the edges. She sat down under a palo verde tree. Just for a minute, she told herself. She felt for the first time in 7 days completely without fear. That was the moment she almost died, not from thirst, not from heat, not from a dramatic physical collapse, from surrender that felt exactly like peace. And then she shifted her position against the tree, and her fingers found something flat and stiff tucked against her ribs, small, laminated. She pulled it out. 3 weeks before the trip, her daughter Sophia, 22 years old, is studying education, the person Miriam was most proud of in the world, had made her a card. On one side, a hand-drawn map of their neighborhood labeled with every place Miriam loved. The coffee shop where she went every Saturday morning, the park bench where they'd had their best conversations, the dentist's office where Miriam had worked for 16 years. Sophia had drawn the coffee shop with a tiny steam curl coming off the cup, and she had put a small heart next to the dentist's office because she knew her mother loved that job. She had labeled the park bench the bench, like there was only one bench in the world. And for Miriam, there was only one. On the other side, in Sophia's handwriting, "You always know how to find your way home, Mom." Miriam had laughed when she received it. She tucked it into her bra the way she kept things she considered lucky, and she had forgotten it was there. And she looked at those words for a very long time. Then she looked at the little map, the steam curl, the heart, the bench with its label, the whole ordinary, irreplaceable geography of a life she had built. Fear came back, the right kind. The real kind, or the kind that means there is something worth being afraid of losing. She was not going to let Sophia get a phone call. She was not going to let her daughter spend the rest of her life wondering if her mother had been alone at the end, in the dirt, under a tree without anyone knowing. Miriam Castillo-Vega stood up. She wrapped the card back against her ribs. She picked up the atlas. She oriented east. She walked. The Sonoran monsoon doesn't build the way storms build in other places. It is invisible until it isn't. And then it is massive all at once. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in 11 minutes. The sky turned from white to green. The wind arrived first, 40 miles per hour, horizontal, full of sand that hit exposed skin like thrown gravel. Then the rain, not rain, a wall of water. A monsoon downpour in desert terrain drops more water in 30 minutes than most cities see in a week. The dry creek beds she had been using as navigation corridors, the same ones she dug water from 3 nights ago, were now moving water. Flash flood channels, dangerous fast, invisible in the dark. She ran for high ground, on one working ankle, in the dark, in the middle of a monsoon, and she fell twice. The second fall put her face first into the mud, and she lay there for a moment thinking, after everything, this. She got up. She found a granite shelf jutting from a hillside and pressed herself beneath the overhang, wrapped the mylar blanket around her body and waited. She talked to Roberto while she waited, the way she had been talking to him every night since she left him. She told him where she was. She told him she was close, and she argued with him about the best route east, the way they'd always argued about directions. She told him she was going to be fine. The rain lasted 4 hours. When it stopped, the desert smelled like the world had been washed clean. And in the gray light before dawn on the high ground to the east, she saw it. A water tower. She didn't celebrate. She didn't cry. She just started walking toward it. She had learned in 9 days that the desert gives you nothing. You have to close every distance yourself. A water tower means a settlement. A settlement means people. She walked toward it with the same quiet, exhausted determination she had walked with for 9 days. 3 more hours. The town was called Atil, population 260. Adobe buildings, a small church, a gas station with 1 pump. The main road running through it was unpaved and still wet from the monsoon, and the first person who saw her was a 10-year-old boy named Angel, sweeping the porch of his grandmother's house at sunrise. He looked up and saw a woman in torn clothing walking down the center of the road, 1 shoe covered in dried mud, holding a laminated card in one hand and a road atlas in the other, her left leg dragging slightly with every step. He ran inside and got his grandmother. His grandmother, her name was Esperanza, took 1 look at Miriam and said in Spanish, "Sit down, you sit down, sit down." She brought water. She brought broth. She did not ask a single question for 40 minutes. Miriam has never been able to find Esperanza since the family moved. But she says in her account, "She sat with me like I was her own daughter. I didn't have to explain anything. She just knew." Local police were called. They radioed Border Patrol. Within 6 hours, a search and rescue team was dispatched into the desert to recover Roberto's body, and they found the car exactly where Miriam had circled it on the atlas. The pencil mark she had made on the first day, in case she needed to communicate it to someone. She had planned for that possibility even in the first hours of grief. The rescue team's formal report documented Miriam's route using GPS reconstruction from her account, 91.4 miles over 9 days. Nocturnal travel to avoid peak heat, 2 successful water excavations from dry creek beds, caloric intake from prickly pear cactus, in navigation by paper atlas and watch compass, every major decision correct, every adaptation made without prior knowledge. The SAR coordinator told a journalist afterward, "We've seen trained survivalists not make it in those conditions. What she did, the decisions she made, were textbook. She had no idea they were textbook. She just made them." Miriam Castillo-Vega was hospitalized for 11 days, 2nd-degree burns on her arms and neck, in severe dehydration. Her kidneys had begun to fail by the time she reached Atil. 14 pounds lost. A hairline fracture in her left ankle that had gone untreated for 6 days of walking. Early-stage trachoma from wind-driven dust. She kept telling the doctors she was fine, that she needed to call her daughter. They let her call Sophia on day 2. She said she didn't explain anything on that call. She just said, "I found my way home." Here's the part they never include in the rescue story, and the part worth understanding. Decision 1. The shortcut. They trusted a trucking form over official road information. One call to the Mexican Federal Road Authority, which lists every closed road publicly, would have ended this story before it began. Most people make this exact error. Informal information feels faster, more real, more current than official sources. For low-stakes decisions, that's usually fine. For decisions that put you 60 miles into a remote desert, and it is the kind of error that cannot be undone. Decision 2. Roberto in the afternoon heat. When the car got stuck, Roberto got out and exerted himself in peak heat, responding to the immediate crisis without accounting for his body's limits. In the 2 hours after noon, heat-related cardiac events increased dramatically. The correct move was shade, water, and rest until after 4 p.m. But under stress, inaction feels like failure. Most people default to doing something. In the Sonoran Desert in July, doing nothing is sometimes the only thing that keeps you alive. Decision 3. The Mylar blanket is a signal device. When Miriam ran toward the rancher's truck on day 5, she used the Mylar blanket to flag him down. It didn't work, and now she had no blanket for the monsoon. What she had the entire time was Roberto's watch. The reflective crystal face of a standard watch can flash visible light over a mile in direct sunlight, and she'd had a signal mirror in her hands for 9 days and didn't know it. Any one of these decisions made differently and Roberto comes home. Any one of them, and Miriam never discovers what she is made of. That is the terrifying, irreducible truth of survival situations. They are almost never one catastrophic failure. They are 3 small ones, in a row, on an ordinary Tuesday, on a road that was supposed to be fine. Miriam still works as a dental hygienist in Tucson. She is 52 now. She has given interviews to 2 regional newspapers and 1 Spanish-language television program. She has never given an English-language interview. She says she doesn't want the story to become about drama. She wants it to be about Roberto. She had his name added to a memorial in Hermosillo. She visits it every July. She kept Sophia's card, had it relaminated after the monsoon soaked the original. It lives in her wallet now. She said once, in the Spanish television interview, "I don't think I survived because I was strong. I think I survived because the desert kept giving me the next small thing to do and I kept doing it. One more step. 1 more hour, 1 more reason." The SAR coordinator who debriefed her spent 4 hours going through every decision she made. At the end of the session, he asked her what she thought about during the walking, what kept her mind occupied through 9 nights alone in the dark, and she said she talked to Roberto, out loud the whole time so she could hear a voice. She told him what she was doing, where she was going. She argued with him about routes. She told him what she was thinking. On the last night, she told him she'd found a way home, that he didn't have to worry. The coordinator included this in his formal report. Underneath it, he added a note in brackets. She should not have survived this. The fact that she did cannot be fully explained by the decision she made, and some of it was luck, but most of it was that she never stopped making decisions at all. That's the whole of it, that's everything. The will to survive is not something extraordinary people possess, it's something ordinary people discover they already had, when everything else has been stripped away and there is only the next step forward and the reason to take it. And Miriam's reason was a laminated card with a steam curl above a coffee cup, and a heart next to a dentist's office and a bench that was the only bench in the world. She carried it 90 miles home. If stories like this remind you that humans are built for more than they believe, you already know why you're here.